Kind people often grow up believing that kindness is a strength that protects them from pain. They are taught, directly or indirectly, that being good, understanding, and selfless will earn them love, safety, and respect. But psychology tells a very different story. Kind people don't suffer because they are weak. They suffer because their nervous system, emotional wiring, and belief system are built around survival through harmony. Most kind people learned very early that peace was safer than conflict. They learned to read the room, sense emotional shifts, and adjust themselves to keep things calm. This didn't happen because they were naturally gentle. It happened because at some point, tension felt dangerous. When a child grows up in an environment where love is conditional, emotions are unpredictable, or conflict feels overwhelming, the brain adapts. It learns that being agreeable is safer than being honest. Psychologists call this a survival response, not a personality trait. Kindness, in these cases, becomes a strategy, a way to stay accepted, a way to avoid abandonment, a way to prevent emotional explosions. Over time, this strategy becomes automatic. The person no longer chooses kindness, they default to it, even when it costs them deeply. Kind people often feel responsible for other people's emotions. If someone is upset, they assume they did something wrong. If someone is distant, they overanalyze their own behavior. This is because their nervous system was trained to believe that emotional safety depends on keeping others happy. Their brain associates approval with survival. This is where suffering begins, because the world does not reward emotional self-sacrifice the way kind people expect it to. Instead, it often exploits it. People who constantly give understanding, forgiveness, and patience without boundaries unintentionally teach others that their needs come last. Not because others are evil, but because humans unconsciously follow the rules we set through our behavior. Kind people struggle to express anger. They often feel guilty for feeling it at all. Anger to them feels like danger. Their brain associates anger with loss of love, connection, or safety. So instead of expressing it outwardly, they turn it inward. This leads to chronic self-blame, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Psychology shows that suppressed emotions don't disappear. They convert into stress responses inside the body. This is why kind people often experience unexplained fatigue, burnout, headaches, or emotional numbness. Their body is carrying emotions their voice never released. Another reason kind people suffer is their high empathy. They don't just understand pain, they absorb it. Their mirror neurons activate intensely, meaning they physically feel the emotional states of others. This makes them compassionate, but it also makes them vulnerable. Without emotional boundaries, empathy becomes emotional flooding. Kind people also tend to idealize others. They assume people think, feel, and care the way they do. This leads to repeated disappointment. When others act selfishly, detach emotionally, or take advantage, kind people don't just feel hurt, they feel confused, because their internal model of human behavior doesn't match reality. This confusion deepens their suffering. Instead of questioning others' behavior, they question their own worth. They ask, "Why wasn't I enough?" instead of, "Why did I tolerate this?" This internalization of pain is one of the core psychological reasons kind people suffer the most. And the most painful part is that kind people often don't even realize they are hurting. They normalize emotional neglect. They minimize their own pain. They tell themselves that others have it worse. Over time, this invalidation of self becomes a habit. Kind people don't attract pain because they want it. They attract it because their emotional patterns are familiar to people who seek control, validation, or emotional comfort without responsibility. Psychology calls this pattern repetition. We are subconsciously drawn to what feels familiar, even when it hurts. Kind people are often emotionally consistent. They listen, they forgive, they stay. These traits feel safe to people who are emotionally unstable, avoidant, or self-centered. But safety without boundaries turns into access, and access without limits leads to exploitation. One major reason kind people suffer in relationships is their belief that love means endurance. They believe that if they are patient enough, understanding enough, or loyal enough, things will change. This belief often comes from early experiences where love had to be earned through behavior. Psychology shows that people who grow up emotionally overfunctioning often attract partners who emotionally underfunction. One gives too much, the other takes too much. This imbalance feels normal at first because it mirrors old emotional roles. Kind people ignore red flags because they see potential instead of patterns. They focus on who someone could be, not who they consistently are. Their empathy fills gaps that reality has not earned. Another reason kind people suffer is their fear of being too much. They silence their needs to avoid burdening others. They wait to be asked instead of asking. Over time, this creates emotional invisibility. Their presence becomes supportive, but not deeply valued. Emotionally, kind people often become the safe place for others, but no one asks whether the safe place itself is safe. They become the listener, the fixer, the emotional anchor, while slowly drowning themselves. Many kind people confuse empathy with responsibility. They feel obligated to heal others, but healing is not a group project. When emotional labor is carried alone, resentment builds quietly. This resentment does not always show as anger. Sometimes it shows as withdrawal, numbness, or sudden emotional collapse. The body eventually demands what the mind keeps denying. Kind people also forgive too quickly. Forgiveness becomes a way to avoid conflict rather than a conscious choice. But unearned forgiveness teaches others that consequences do not exist. Letting go is especially hard. Walking away feels like failure. Distance feels like cruelty. But psychology is clear that self-respect is not cruelty, and boundaries are not punishment. Healing for kind people does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming selective. It means understanding that boundaries are not walls, but doors with locks. Saying no does not make someone bad. It tells the nervous system that safety does not depend on approval. Learning to pause before giving and to check internal needs before reacting is essential. Empathy must be separated from responsibility. You can understand someone's pain, but without carrying it. You can care without fixing. You can love without sacrificing yourself. Healing also involves grief. Grief for the times you were not protected. Grief for the love you gave hoping it would save you. Grief for the self you abandoned to keep others comfortable. Love must be redefined. Love is not endurance. Love is reciprocity. Love is emotional safety in both directions. When kind people develop boundaries, relationships change. Some people leave. Some resist. Some reveal their true intentions. This loss hurts, but it brings clarity. Peace may feel unfamiliar at first. Calm may feel boring when chaos was normalized. Healing requires learning to tolerate peace without guilt. Self-trust becomes essential. Discomfort is no longer ignored or explained away. It is treated as information. Over time, kindness becomes a choice instead of a reflex. It becomes powerful instead of draining. It becomes balanced instead of painful. Kind people stop suffering not when they become less kind, but when they finally become kind to themselves.